Hi everyone. Welcome to our session about Azure DevTest Labs. Maybe just a quick show of hands. Who of you has already used maybe Azure DevTest Labs, or who of you already knows Azure DevTest Labs? 1, 2, 3? Not that much. That's perfect, because it's going to be pretty much an overview session. What is Azure DevTest Labs, if I can say it correctly? What you can do with it, and yeah, how you can benefit from this Microsoft service. My name is Stefan Joner. I am a Cloud Platform Manager at Swiss Post, and I'm also a Microsoft MEP since last year, I think. And I will present together with my buddy Stefan Roth.
Hello everyone, my name is Stefan Roth. I'm a Cloud and Data Center MEP working at ITNetX, and I have a monitoring background but do some automation, and I'm happy to have a session with my buddy Stefan. Just one quick question, who does not know at all what DevTest Labs is? Never heard that? Okay, some heard, but okay. Okay, go ahead.
Let's get started. Well, to be honest, this number, these 50%, that's a number which is presented by Microsoft. I'm not sure if that's really correct. Maybe, what do you think? How much of your infrastructure spending is just used by dev or test workloads? Any ideas? Maybe 30%? Maybe 50% is a little high, I think, but maybe 20, 30, up to 40% maybe, can be infrastructure that is not productively used, but it is used by dev and test workloads. So that's a pretty big number, I think. And the demand of these dev and test workloads, it varies greatly, I think, because if your devs are spinning up their machines, maybe on Monday when they go to the office, you're going to have a lot higher workloads than you have on the weekends, maybe, when there's no devs working, actually. So with a traditional infrastructure deployment, you have to deploy infrastructure for your dev and test environments to have these peaks covered. So if your peak is somewhere here, you have to deploy infrastructure to cover this peak, and this infrastructure is in your data center. You have to pay it, but it's not used, or not used a lot. So it's unused capacity, basically, and with Azure DevTest Labs, you can much more granularly scale this capacity you use for dev test environments to reduce your infrastructure on-prem and to reduce your costs. Basically, DevTest Labs is a solution for really fast and agile dev test environments. It is hosted in Azure. All these virtual machines which you spin up in Azure DevTest Labs are hosted in Azure. It's pretty much automated. Everything is automated. You can have self-service. Your devs can just spin up their VMs. You can have images which you provide to your devs. They can take an image, spin up a VM based on this image, and they have their dev or test environment. And you can also control your cost. You can have auto shutdown. You have auto shutdown and auto startup capabilities, which greatly reduces costs of your dev test environments. Basically, there are maybe 4 different scenarios for dev test labs. The first of all, and the most popular one, is probably dev machines. So you have some devs in your company, and you have to provide them some machines to do their development. So instead of providing these machines on your infrastructure on-prem, you can use Azure DevTest Labs. So your devs can, by using self-service, just provision their VMs their dev VMs as much as they need or as much as you configured that they can provision. And they can do all their work in a VM which is running on Azure. And it's literally, this VM is up and running in minutes. It's up in maybe 2 to 5 minutes. It depends on the image and the software which is installed dynamically on this VM. Another scenario are test environments, of course, and that's also a very cool use case. Imagine if you have an application which needs to be tested from time to time. So you do a change on your application and you want to deploy that app somewhere that someone can test it if this change was implemented correctly. So you spin up a VM, you dynamically get your code, for example, from GitHub of your application. You deploy your application to this new machine, and someone can log in and just test and click the UI and all this stuff. And the same, it's up and running in minutes. And you can shut down after the tests are finished. Everything looks good, shut down the VM, and you don't have to spend any money on your infrastructure for testing. Another scenario is training and education. If you have trainings for maybe 10 users or something, just provision VMs in Azure DevTest Labs, and you can make these VMs claimable. So you prepare maybe 3 VMs in this case, and everyone which takes this training can just claim a VM and use it for his training. After the training, you shut the VMs down, and you don't have any cost for this training infrastructure anymore. And a trial demo scenario where you can just spin up a VM maybe to give a demo to a customer. You have software, you want to demo the software to a customer, spin up a VM in Azure DevTest Labs. You can also give access for the customer to Azure DevTest Labs, for example, and they can spin up VMs for demo purposes or trial purposes. That's it, and with that, I will hand over to Stefan.
Thank you very much. So now we have the use cases for what you can use these DevTest Labs. Now we have to clarify some terms, what it is. There is DevTest Labs, of course, it's the service in Azure. It's called DevTest Labs, but it's also actually the DevTest Labs, it's a sandbox of itself. So you create the DevTest Lab, as you will see then in the overview demo. And this sandbox, every administrator who creates one, is the administrator of this lab, builds his own sandbox. So every component within this sandbox is owned by this administrator. You can create multiple DevTest labs, such sandboxes, and one administrator cannot access the other one. So it's closed environment. Then there are base images. Base images are basically those images you're getting from the marketplace, or images you're preparing, custom images. You can upload to DevTest Labs. We will see this in a demo also. And one special term is, of course, artifacts. Artifacts is a piece. It's basically a piece you apply to the base image. You can store this piece. It's actually a JSON file, and you store this in a repo in GitHub, in your public GitHub or private GitHub, and in the artifact repository, and you can load this artifact after the image is deployed. It will apply to the VM after it's deployed. All of this stuff I will show you in the overview demo, and also Stefan in more detail, so don't panic. The formulas, that's basically a setting where you have defined your base images and your artifacts, and then you define also the sizes of the VM and the storage. So you pack everything together, and then you have your formula. So we have a presetting for deploying a pre-configured VM, if you want. Then there are policies. That's where the great powers comes for DevTest Labs. Policies, that's very defined when the VM should start and it should stop automatically, so you don't have to create a runbook or something like that. And you can define how many VMs you can deploy per user or per lab. So you can limit. So there's also a cost issue. So you can say, okay, they cannot deploy more than 10 VMs per lab, or this user can only create 2 VMs. And then also you can limit the images you can deploy in DevTest Lab. Schedules, I mixed it up, are the things you define for starting and shutting down the VMs. So in the morning, let's say you have a workshop, and then it starts at 7:30, so you say set the schedule to 7 o'clock, and then it will start up the VMs, and in the evening, when it's finished, so maybe at 6 o'clock, you define maybe schedule, so 6:30, all VMs should shut down in this lab. Then caps. Caps is where you can get an overview of how much money you spend in this lab. So on a current base, or it will also calculate how much money you will spend in this coming month. So there is an estimate. And there are roles. There are 3 roles. There is a Azure DevTest Lab user role, where he can use his own VMs, startup, shutdown, and do some stuff with the artifacts and formulas, but that's it. There is the administrator, he has full power, and then there is the contributor. He's same as the administrator, but he cannot add any user roles. So that's the only difference. How to provision? So everything goes about these virtual machines. There are different ways you can deploy virtual machines. There is the Marketplace. Of course, as you're used to in Azure, you go there and then you select your Linux, your Windows, your whatever image from Microsoft. But you also can upload your custom image, like you have one created on your local Hyper-V, and then you just have to convert it to VHD. So VHDX are not supported. You upload them, and it takes some time depending on your connection, and you will see it then in the DevTest Lab. There are tools and software customization via Artifact. As I mentioned before, you can create your JSON file, you store it in your GitHub repository, and then apply it to your images, and then you can do pretty much anything, as we will see. Then the formulas, it's a more easy way to deploy all the settings. So you can provide the formulas to the end user, and you already have defined the image he should use, the size he is allowed to use, and also the artifacts he's to use. So everything is predefined. And you also then can use it with the continuous integration, like team services or TFS. So there is a piece of software you can configure, and then you can integrate it into TFS. Everything clear so far? Are we too fast? Too sleepy? Okay. So what is happening behind the scenes? As we will see, we just say, okay, DevTest Lab, that's the name, it will deploy, and we set just a schedule for shutting down the VM, that's it, and then it will be created. In the background, there will be a resource group created, then a storage account will be created, then a virtual network will be created, and also Azure Key Vault for storing your credentials. That's everything happen just with one click, so you don't have to go there and configure your network stuff, and everything is ready, and you're able to deploy the virtual machines. Sounds cool, no? So, how does it look like? Can you hear me? Okay, I have to work with this thing here. So. Oh. Okay, how do you get to this DevTest Lab? You go to the search bar up here, and then you type. Can you see it? Everything working? Okay, cool. DevTest lab, and then you enter the service, DevTest service. You can go there, and then you say add. And you give it a wonderful name of, let's say, Demo01. You select your subscription to which you want to deploy it, and the location, of course. And here you set your first policy. Is it too small in the background, or can you see it? Should I zoom it? Oh. Better? Okay. So here is set the schedule. You can change it then afterwards, and you can also set in startup. We will see it right in a minute. So I said OK. And then I click create. So I already have my own DevTest lab. Okay, it's still deploying. Let's see. So yeah, okay. Now it's deploying in the background, and we go to my current lab, which I use for my own testing. There is an overview tab where you see, okay, your virtual machines, if they are running or not, if there is auto shutdown enabled, and so on. It's just the overview setting you're used to every Azure service. There's not much special to see. The power comes with these configuration policies here. Okay, all the stuff I mentioned before, we will see it now live. So there is the cost trend. So DevTest Lab is cost oriented. So you will save money, and you can shut down, and you can predict how much you will spend, and so on. And that's true. So that's a very cool interface where you see how much money you spent up to now this month, and there is an estimation how much I will spend until the end of the month. Okay. Then you can set targets. Those are the lines you've seen here. The broken lines. Manage target, and you can say, okay, I don't want to spend more than $500. That's okay. That's my limit for this month. And then I want to be notified if there is 75% reached. And also you can plot the line on the chart we've seen before. The integration is you can trigger a webhook, and it will trigger if it reaches this limit. So there is some automation if you want to trigger some runbooks and functions, some whatever. So everything that today everything can receive a webhook. I have got the feeling.
You could, for example, trigger a webhook which shuts down your VMs, like which gets VMs which are running for, don't know, 20 days, and shuts down these VMs, for example. Maybe an option.
Okay. And then also very cool is now you get this broken down to the resource, how much this resource already spent up to now this month. So for me, you can see my SQL server is a standard DS1 machine, and I spend $31 on it. And then I have their storage account, as I can see, for $2 here. So it's split up, so you have some sort of control. I just have seen that there is an update. You also can get this information using PowerShell. You have to store it in a storage account, this information, and get it from there, and then you maybe can create a CSV for plotting on your whatever favorite tool. Now we are going to the policy settings here. Here you define what the user can use. You get all the sizes. So 1 core, 2 cores, 14 gigs, whatever, and you can limit by setting here just a check mark and then save it up here. And then the user can only choose from those images. Or those hardware settings, yeah.
That's pretty cool, because you probably want to exclude the really expensive sizes where you pay by like $200 an hour or something.
Yeah.
That's a good option.
Then, okay. Here you will see the virtual machines per user. Here you set the limitation. What is the limit of number of virtual machines the user can use? Or even you can limit it to the storage account if you can use premium storage like SSDs. It's also cost relevant. Next is similar, just settings per lab. So you say, okay, for my entire environment, I want to set it to whatever number. It's pretty simple to set, but has a huge impact of your lab. Okay. The schedules, it's pretty cool. I mean, before there were, when Azure Automation was coming up, the first runbook you built probably, oh, I want to shut down my VMs because I forgot it. That's probably the first runbook you ever built using Azure. Now everything is built in here. So you shut down, default is 7 evenings, and then you have to select your time zone where you live or where you set up your DevTest lab. And also you can also send emails if you want to receive emails if it's really has been shut down, this stuff, or trigger webhook again. The same applies for AutoStart. But cool thing is, if you have a workshop and it goes maybe 5 days, so you can set it for all the days for the working week. Up here, you enable it. I cannot do it because I'm zooming, and then you could do it here. So, okay, that's awesome. Okay, those are the basic, very important settings you can get. Now I just show you the repository. We talked about artifacts.
Sorry, quick question. The DevTest lab is focused on VMs.
Yes.
It's not possible to mix it with web apps or something like this?
No. You can use Azure Marketplace image, then you can, for example, choose SQL Server. Then there you have an application installed, but it's not a focus on, you have your web app and then you limit there. You probably would have to spin up your VM and then use some sort of TFS, your development process, and then deploy all this stuff in there. Or then maybe using the artifact, so your web app gets deployed after the VM is up and running, but it's not the web app PaaS service as it used.
No PaaS services.
No PaaS service, right. So here you define the repository where you will store the artifacts. You can use the public or your private repo. Stefan will show it a bit more. You just add the path and you get access to it. Okay. The next virtual networks settings. As I said before, when you deploy such a DevTest lab, your network is already deployed, and there you can also set some policy. It's a bit hidden if you click onto the network, and you can define if you want to use this virtual network then for virtual machine creation, so it should be deployed there if you create a VM or not. You can enable shared IP addresses, so you get IP address and port. It's available on for internet, or you can just set the IP for an external IP address, I think. And here, you also limit the virtual machines per user. You can define it on the network. I haven't tried that out. So, but it's there.
Can you do shaping?
Hmm?
Can you do shaping? Like if you want to test in a scenario where I'm over like 512K or something, can you limit the bandwidth on those networks?
No, no. There is no network QoS or shutting down limitation. No. Okay. Then we are going to the virtual machine bases, those base images we were talking about. Here you set all the images you want to allow or deny. So here is what you can deploy here. You can control with DevTest Lab. So there is from the Linux, different Linux deployments to SQL Server. I'm not sure, but I think it's everything available. That it's available on the marketplace there, but I'm not sure. You can upload your custom images, your VHDs. I just did it here, so it takes some time. So VHD upload, as long as it takes, the bigger, the longer it takes, of course. And then the formulas. Okay, I show you now the final result. So that's everything together, the formula. But there you will see the breakdown, what the formula is. Okay, so you say what is the disk size here? Disk and size. Okay, here you see the premium or the legacy storage. Then also the size of the VM. Here, that's where the user cannot select any other size. So if you restrict it just to DS1 VM or size, then you only see that one. There is not more. That's where everything comes together. Then the artifact stuff we have talked about. That's there are already some in a public repo from Microsoft, where you have this small kind of snippet JSON file, which you can apply after the VM has deployed. You have the 7-zip, there are some Chrome Explorer or Firefox. And what you can do, you can also contribute your own artifacts to this repo if you want. And then you have it always available if you create a workshop, or if you don't want to keep it on your own private repository. So.
Artifact is I develop something and I can put it there to make business maybe?
Yeah, you cannot. I don't think it's intended to make business. That's more the marketplace, the Azure Marketplace, where you can make business. I will talk about that later on, but it's basically a public GitHub repo, which is provided by Microsoft, and where these artifacts are lying. And you can take these artifacts from this public repo and just use it there in your DevTest environment. But I think there's no mechanism for like purchasing something from these.
There is,
No.
If I develop something, I don't have to.
Yeah, you can develop an artifact for it maybe, and which installs this software, and which maybe you have to purchase a license key or something that the software is running afterwards on the VM. But yeah, it's like an external thing. Yeah.
Okay, and then there for your formulas, remember we are still in the formula, but everything puts together. So we are now in the network options, where we define into which network this formula the VM will be deployed, in which subnet, and here you see the IP address configurations for public, private, or shared. So just only public IP address shared with a port, so nothing is behind, or then a private, it's a closed environment. Okay, and here is a point we haven't spoken about, is the claim options. you can say, okay, this virtual machine which is being created should be claimable. Claimable means that if you have a workshop, as Stefan explained, you have 10 users, then you can create those VMs, 10 VMs, and every user can claim a virtual machine, then it belongs to him. So no one has any more access, so it's a kind of pool for virtual machine, and everyone can get one. So you could use the policy, okay, every user just can get one virtual machine and not more, so you create a pool with 10 virtual machine, and you cannot claim more than one virtual machine. Should work. And this is also very cool setting here, number of instances. So you can define how many instances of this VM should be created at once. So we define 5, then 5 of those VMs will be created. Okay. And of course here the image, actually what you want to deploy. Sorry. As you can see up here, my custom image is also here available, which I uploaded. You can also select that one. It has to be sysprepped, of course. Okay. So that was the formula. And then we are pretty much done with all the settings. Of course, you have the same tab here, manage, where you can set the access, properties, activity logs, and all this stuff, which you have for every service in Azure. Let me go back to my lab. So I started with the overview topic, and here you see there is a setting where you can see the claimable virtual machine, which the setting we have seen before. So if you have both the virtual machines, you will see it there. My virtual machine is only the virtual machine you own, and all virtual machine as an administrator, you will see all the virtual machines available. The last setting I want to show you, or the second last, is the data disk. It's basically an overview. If you attach a disk to a virtual machine, then you will see the data disk on this virtual machine. I think I had one. It's loading. Not anymore. Maybe I deleted the resource. Well, it's here. Okay, this is data disk. It's just a D drive or something like that on your virtual machine. And of course, the secrets, as you have seen, we have the key vault in the background deployed. And here you have just the name key value setting, and in the background is stored in the key vault. Okay. So
Maybe just one. The data disk you can use, for example, to store persistent files or something, files which are used for devs and which are the same always. Even if you spin up a new machine, you want to use those files maybe, and so you can, every time you spin up a new machine, you can attach this data disk where you have your repository with some files on it, and you can use them afterwards in this VM, and you can shut down the VM, you can delete the VM, and if you create a new one, you can again attach this data disk, and you have your environment there on your data disk you can use.
Any questions so far, or is it okay? Now you've pretty much seen every setting you can do in DevTest Lab. Of course, you can use in the background the CLI or PowerShell to access all these resources and do some other fun stuff. But there is also on GitHub a repository where you have some ARM templates. If you say, okay, I have hundreds of workshops and I want to create this lab not all the time by clicking, so I will create my ARM template once, then you can do that. There are some help already available here. Samples. can see there is how you create the formula, for example, or create custom image from Windows VM, or I picked one, and the way it works is just to create the DevTest lab instance, so the container basically for the DevTest lab. You click on the deploy to Azure button, and it's the same for as you creating using the GUI. You can select the resource group, create a new, let's say, test 1, 2, 3. New lab name is test 1, 2, 3. Then I agree to this stuff for the people in the background. But if you have or deployed an ARM template before like this, on clicking on the button deploy to Azure, then it's just a dialog you have to fill out, and then purchase. So you get not charged, but it says purchase. So, and then it will deploy to DevTest labs. So.
Yeah, question?
Question. Does a DevTest lab virtual machine have any limitations normal VM in Azure has? Not.
I think it's pretty much the same limitations as with normal VMs in Azure.
Yeah, the same limitations for the DevTest lab apply, which you have also for the subscription. So you cannot deploy more than something course or whatever, and there is no limitation as far as I know. It also comes down to the billing. You know, Azure DevTest lab is free, basically, but you get charged for the resources you're using. So, yeah.
So why should the customer not use DevTest lab for the production environment?
Why not?
Good question.
Are the costs the same as in Azure?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For the resources?
Yeah, you pay the same for the resources. Yeah. Yeah.
So you get no discount because of it's a dev test?
Not as far as I know. No. No.
I had a question about the data disk. I didn't quite get. Did you say it's persistent? So
Yeah.
you attach that disk, you do something in the first iteration of the test.
Yeah.
Then you delete that VM, attach it again. That data is still on that same disk.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like a VHD, which you attach to a VM, and you detach it before you delete the VM, and you attach it to the next VM you provision.
And it's the same state as it was before. It's
Yeah.
not like it doesn't copy it to the next VM, it's just attached.
No, it's attached. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a secondary disk on your computer.
Okay.
It's like-
So then it can only be attached to one VM at a time.
I think so. Yeah. Yes.
Is it completely sandboxed, or can you reach to resources outside of the dev test lab, like AD, Azure Federated AD or something like that?
I did not test that. Did you?
Depends on the connection. I mean, if you go outside, so if you internet access, then you will be able to access from the virtual machine to the Azure Active Directory.
Mm.
But if you create your, I mean, yeah, see the resources here. I deployed. So there is this virtual network, and so I mean that there is the limitation. There where you say, okay, can you talk to whatever? I mean, yeah. That's maybe also a reason maybe not to use it in production, because I'm not a networking guy, but there may be some things you cannot apply, network security groups and stuff like that. So there maybe you will hit the...
It's like the VNet is like the container a little bit. You have this VNet boundary where you cannot deploy any other resources in this VNet, which was created by DevTest Labs. You can only provision like DevTest Labs VMs in this VNet. You can't have like other services in this VNet, like another storage account from in Azure, which you cannot provision it or connect it to this VNet.
Okay, So now this was the boring stuff, you know. Now it comes to real meat. That was Stefan showing you.
I
Okay.
I hope it will be. I tried to to explain a little bit the problem Azure DevTest Lab solves. I tried to create a small demo application. It's kind of a custom application like you may have in your companies, and the goal behind that is to show you that it's pretty easy to have your custom application and have it deployed in a dev test system on Azure DevTest Labs. So basically I created this small web app. I was a service manager guy, and with service manager it's always pretty annoying to find out which version is installed, and so I created this service manager build database. And it's basically just a small web app which is built with PHP. And if we have this web app, we have the source code is located on GitHub, and we have two kinds of sources which are used if I need to provision this app. First of all, it's a CSV which contains all the data which should be provisioned in the database. And there are the PHP source files. And, wrong button. If I want to deploy this app to a server, I first need a Linux server. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Linux server, but I used a Linux server, Ubuntu. And after that, I have to install Mariah or MySQL DB. After that, I have to install PHP, and of course Apache on top of it, or any other web service. And and of course, I have to download the sources from GitHub to the server. So I have the files on the server, and I also have to import the CSV file into the database. So I have the data in the database. And that's kind of solving a puzzle. Every time I want to deploy a new test system, maybe I changed something in my application, and I want to deploy it to a test server just to test if it works, if it still works. And it's kind of solving a puzzle every time I want to deploy this. So basically what helps you with this are reusable templates, and there are two kinds of reusable templates. As Stefan already said, there are custom images and formulas. So I could build a custom image which has this application inside and database and all this stuff provisioned, but I would have to change this image every time I change my source. And with formulas, this gets a little easier. So custom images, just quickly, it's faster if you use custom images. Provisioning a VM is faster than with custom images than using formulas. But yeah, you need to update the custom image if you want to have some other data in your test environment. For the formulas, we can capture changes to the application with the use of artifacts, and artifacts are pretty awesome. And you can define default settings and all the stuff Stefan showed you before, but it takes some more time to provision the virtual machine. Now, to go a little bit into details with artifacts, basically you have repositories connected to your Azure DevTest Lab environment. That can be TFS or Visual Studio Online or GitHub. And you can place your artifacts in these repositories, so that if you connect your repository to Azure DevTest Lab, you will see your artifacts in Azure DevTest Lab, and you can choose them to create a formula, or you can add them to a VM. And basically, if you add them to a VM, the VM is provisioned, and after the provisioning process, artifacts are applied. And as you can see, they can be mixed up, so you can use artifacts from public Microsoft repository, but you can also use your own private artifacts from your own private repository. Basically, an artifact is just a script, like the mechanism is using Azure script extension to install these bits after the VM is created. Okay, so quick demo. I hope that works. Just to show you in the beginning, I already deployed a VM with my app on it in my Azure DevTest Labs account. And I will now change something in the source of my app. For example, I will change title to Experts Live 17. I will deploy that. I will push that to Git or GitHub in my case, and we should see that. Oh, my GitHub repository. Yeah, index.php was updated some seconds ago, and I will now provision a new VM based on a formula I already created before. I will go into details about this formula right afterwards. I name it Experts Live Demo. I use a SSH public key. And all this configuration is in the formula. Like I could change it as a user. I can create a VM from the formula, and I could change the settings of the VM. It's just pre-configured with the formula. I will create this, and now it's going to be provisioned in my Azure DevTest Labs account. To show you a little bit the details of these artifacts, if we go to the settings in my Azure DevTest Labs account and go to repositories, you can see that besides the public repository, I've configured my own repository. That's pretty easy. You just have to add your git clone URL. You have to add a access token, which is created in your GitHub account, and that's it. And you can just pull that content from your GitHub repository into Azure DevTest Labs. And that means if we go to a VM, for example, which is already running, let's take this one. You can see that I have 2 more artifacts available to apply to my VMs, which are coming from my private repo.
Can you show them?
Yes.
Yep. So you can apply these artifacts even if it's already running the VM?
Yep.
And it's pushed in the VM?
That's correct. You can also provision a VM just with a base image you take from Microsoft, and you can afterwards apply artifacts. That's true. For example, I can apply a MongoDB artifact, and that would install a MongoDB on my Ubuntu server. Yeah.
So you don't need a formula to deploy artifacts. So to be clear, you just can just deploy a VM, and then you can select an artifact, and you can select multiple artifacts, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they will be applied after the VM has been created. So this formula stuff is don't need to put everything together, make it easy to have it at one click, but you can also just the VM and then select the artifact. You can do that as well.
Yeah. And if we have a look at these artifacts I created, it's pretty simple actually. You have a JSON file and you have a script. You have a PowerShell script if you create an artifact for a Windows machine, or you have a shell script if you create an artifact for a Linux machine. And basically, I have created now an artifact which installs this custom app I created. And I will show that in Visual Studio Code. I think that should be readable. Basically, I have my artifact JSON file, which defines like a name and title and publisher and an icon for this artifact to show up in Azure DevTest Labs. But I can also define parameters. For example, for my web app, I need a password, which is used to connect to this MySQL database. So I have to put in my password if I apply this artifact. And you also define a run command, which is a shell script, which basically does all the work in the background. And the shell script looks like the following. It's pretty easy. You get the input, you get your parameter input, like the password in this case. And for example, I'm doing some basic stuff like deleting all the content in the Apache directory. I clone the repository, like my source. I get the PHP files as well as the CSV, which contains the data to import into the database. I change the default password to the password I set when I configured this or applied this artifact to the VM. And I import, or I create the database, the tables, and import the data from the CSV file. And finally, I copy the PHP files which I got from my GitHub repository. I copy them to the Apache web directory, and that's pretty much it. So it's really pretty easy to have such an artifact. You can, like, if you have a custom app, just the JSON file is boring stuff, and you just have to create a script which does all the work. Like, maybe you already have such a script. If you are doing like testing in your environments and already are installing this application, you may have a script already. Otherwise, it's pretty simple to create one, depending on the app, of course. Okay, and if we have a look now at our VM, now it's in state applying artifacts. So the virtual machine is already created, and it now applies these artifacts. I think maybe now it's either installing MariaDB or it's like installing my application. Maybe one thing to mention is that this VM uses several artifacts. It's like a mixture. Oh, it's installing MariaDB at the moment. I have 3 artifacts here, like installing MariaDB. That's one of my own. That's in my own repository. But there's also an artifact called Linux apt package. That's pretty cool because that's an artifact provided by Microsoft where you just can add like the package you want to install, and it gets installed by using apt. And afterwards, my install SCSM build DB artifact will be running.
So the JSON stuff is basically the wrapper because I mean, you have ARM in the background. ARM has to understand what's coming here, so the artifact has to be in a JSON format. Otherwise, you cannot understand what's in there. And then you have the script part.
That's it.
So there was one thing I saw when you was defining the repository. You can specify artifact path and then ARM path. What are the ARM templates for?
Maybe let me just get to the configuration. That's it. Azure Resource Manager template folder path. Yeah.
What is that for?
I have no idea. Sorry, I didn't use that. Maybe we could. Okay, it's probably if you want to use ARM templates for deployment, maybe. But I would have to check. I did not use that. Yeah. Okay, maybe you can have a look or check back after we finished if the VM is up and running. But yeah, it literally takes some minutes. It takes maybe 5-6 minutes to spin up this VM, and you have a working test environment for your custom application. And with a custom image, you would be a bit faster. It may take 2-3 minutes. It's pretty fast to deploy a VM just with an image, like with this base image Microsoft provides as well. But if you apply artifacts, it can take some more time, depending, of course, on how big your script is, or for example, or how much artifacts you are applying to your VM.
Of course, it depends. I mean, why is it fast? Because custom image, I mean, you deploy all the stuff in there, so you don't have to suck it from somewhere to get all this stuff installed. So if you have a custom image, you want to install as much as you can, but the downside is you cannot change it afterwards. You have it in the image, so you would have to open the image somehow and then change stuff there. So there is always a downside.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the last slide, just a quick summary. Like, I'll encourage you to try it out, Azure DevTest Labs. I think it's really a cool service. It's free. Yeah, like I said before, you are only charged for the resources you are using. Like for the VMs, you can like control that pretty good if you are using like smaller instances instead of big instances and all this. It won't cost you that much money. You have like a central management for your dev test environment. You can define cost limits and all this stuff. That's pretty cool, I think. You can also define limits for resource usage and all this, and you really have a good control over your dev test environments. But on the other side, developers and testers, they really have a self-service experience where they can log in, they can deploy their VMs. They have a dev test VM up and running in 3 minutes, and they can start coding or start testing, and that's pretty cool compared to maybe 2 or 3 days it takes to get a physical computer maybe or even a VM in a local environment.
So you also have to understand. So if you deploy a VM and then you go to the regular Azure VM button there in your portal, then you will see the VM. That's not the point. So it's not that they are living somewhere on other space somewhere. They are in Azure. You can see them there also as well. There is just a permission thing behind, so that you see it in the lab. But they are treated as the same source or resource as any other VM in Azure. Yeah. That's maybe also important.
And maybe just to show you, it's finished now. The VM is up and running now. Artifacts are applied. It took maybe 7 minutes or something, maybe 10. And you can now connect to this web app, and it's there. The changes are there and all this, and it's really easy, yeah, to have this. Yep. Question?
Usually an artifact is the result of a build process, right? For me, it's an artifact.
Yeah. Okay.
So
See. Yeah.
right now you're attaching a Git repo because that makes sense, from a developer perspective. Dedicated artifacts in a separate Git repository. Usually you would do it through a build pipeline,
Yeah.
publish the artifact, and then fetch the artifact from, let's say, the build result.
Yeah. Yeah.
It looks weird for me how it is implemented right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe from terminology perspective, it's a bit weird. What I do actually, the Git repository you connect to, that it's just used to get your artifact definition. It's like the install script, and you can afterwards, with this install script, you can go to a different repository and get your build artifacts there. So the executable or the final product in this case may be lying somewhere else. It can be in your own repository on site maybe or something, but you can get it with with the script and deploy it in the VM afterwards.
So that means right now there is no chance to attach the artifacts of Visual Studio field services.
As far as I know, no. I don't know. I did not work with Visual Studio in this case, but maybe that's possible. Yeah. If you connect, instead of GitHub, if you connect to Visual Studio Online, for example, you may be able to pull that in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Well, yeah, that's basically it. Some links if you want to get started. I think hopefully you learned something new about Azure DevTest Labs. We're here for questions. You can find us at the conference, of course. And yeah, if you want to try it out, check out these links and have fun. Thanks.
Thank you.